Thank you guys for coming tonight, meeting up with me to talk about kind of like Asian culture, especially Asian American culture. So we're just gonna start off by introducing ourselves. So can you both tell me a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Hi, my name is Frankie. Do you notice? My pronouns are she and her, and I go to Rutgers University, and my major is nursing, and I am Chinese and Vietnamese.
Hi, my name is Almanda. My pronouns are she, her. I went to Rutgers University, just graduated last semester, and my major was HR. And then I'm Vietnamese, Chinese, and French.
Ooh, okay. So to begin the interview process, like what was your experience like growing up Asian American?
For me personally, it was like a very big part of my childhood just because when I was younger, I used to perform a lot at like Vietnamese culture events. So I do like singing and dancing and like playing like lion dance strumming when I was little, for like my whole life, and I still do it now. Not as frequently because I used to do it like every weekend, but now I just do it for like New Year's and then the Mid Autumn Festival. Um, but yeah, I always grew up around it. Like my whole house is covered in like a lot of like Vietnamese knickknacks. Like I have at least like 100 ao dais, which is like the Vietnamese dress. It's just a very important thing for both sides of my family, just because they're very in tune with their Vietnamese culture and they made it like their life mission to make sure I don't forget where I come from.
So for me, I am adopted from China, and I came when I was 1 years old. And I grew up in a white household, and I grew up in this town called Haddonfield, which is predominantly white. And growing up, I didn't really notice like a difference in being Asian. I just kind of like blended into being just a part of whoever I was around. I did go to like Chinese school, and I got to experience like that kind of stuff. And my parents did take me to a lot of like Asian restaurants and um, try to expose me to a lot of Asian culture, especially Chinese. But overall, I feel like growing up, yeah, I didn't really feel like Asian or really understand what it meant to be Asian until I went to college.
And how did your college experience kind of like help you out with understanding your identity?
I think so in the beginning, I still didn't really understand, but then I joined the sorority, which is an Asian interest sorority. And at first, like when I went, I didn't like really feel like I fit in because I was like, oh, why would I go to an Asian sorority if I like know nothing about it? But it was actually like a really big eye opener, and it got to expose me to a lot of different cultures and food and just like everyday life. Um, I'm sorry. And yeah, I think it was really great. I met a lot of friends. Um, and just like the little things we did, like how we where we went to eat, instead of just getting like pizza or something, or going over to my friend's house, like Almanda's house, and getting to experience like, like real Vietnamese food, just like little things like that, I think really helps me understand.
Mhm. Yeah, I think for me, even though I was super in tune with my Vietnamese culture, I wasn't really I'm from a pretty diverse town, but even then, like all the Asians are mainly Chinese and Korean. So those are like the main like cultures that I knew of, like when it comes to Asian countries. But after joining, I'm in the same sorority as Frankie. Even though we're all of Asian descent, we're all from very different backgrounds. Like a lot, like some people are very mixed, and some people are adopted, like Frankie, and some people are very in tune with their culture, like I am, or they came from like a white town as well, and they aren't in tune with their culture. And I feel like that's a very common thing in our sorority. Like they felt like they were an outcast as a child because they were in predominantly white towns, and even I felt kind of out of place because I was the only Vietnamese student in my high school, so I didn't really have like a high not a higher connection, but like that cultural connection with someone. So I did still feel pretty left out, and like felt a little weird about being Vietnamese, even though my parents like worked so hard to make sure like I didn't forget it. I think as a kid, you just feel like you want to blend in so bad. But then in college, that's when you like really figure out who you are and kind of find your group, especially at Rutgers, because there's so many people here. But yeah, like one thing I loved about being in Kitty Phi was that even though all are from Asian descent, and then we are able to connect because our cultures are kind of similar because of that, because it's the same continent, obviously. But because of Katie Phi, I was able to experience a bunch of other cultures like Japanese. Who else was there? Like Filipino. Like I didn't really know much about Filipino culture until Rutgers. And with raps too, and then also like Cambodian. Like there's like we're like from a bunch of different countries. I probably like at least 15 different ones. So being able to experience like culture or like learn how they grew up and learn about their food and things like that, it's very eye-opening, and that's like the best part of I think my Rutgers experience. I
Mm.
think learning about other cultures gives you different perspective and like makes you see the world differently.
Mhm.
That's why I want to travel a lot when COVID's over. But yeah.
I can agree that like like these organizations, especially like Asian interest organizations, but not Asian exclusive too, they really help you kind of like figure out your identity when it comes to learning more about your culture, and your background. As you guys know, I am part of RAPS too as well, and I'm very involved in like the student orgs here. I think it's pretty helpful to kind of like gauge into those organizations, just because like like these members are like kind of like the same experience of like
Mhm.
growing up.
Like same
Um,
generation.
yeah, and then like same struggles too,
Mm.
and then like different upbringings. But we're all like in the same culture.
Mhm.
So my next question is, as Asian Americans, how does your pride in your own culture and heritage play a role with your identity?
You want me to go first? It's like a huge, gigantic part of my identity because that's just like all I've ever known. I've like always been surrounded by a bunch of Vietnamese like things. Like in my living room, we have like a bunch of instruments hanging that are all Vietnamese, and I don't even know how to play them. Like it's just we're always just in my house, we're just always surrounded.
She paused.
I think she froze.
She froze. Hold on.
Are you gonna repeat the question?
So the question was, as Asian American, how does your pride in your own culture and heritage play a role with your identity?
Uh, for me, I believe Vietnamese people are like one of the strongest people in the world just because of all the things that they've gone through, like being invaded by like China and then being colonized by France and then the whole Vietnam War, and they're still like recovering from all of that. And like hearing the stories from my parents of how they came to America, and like hearing from my aunts, uncles, just the older generation in general, like I feel like I would never survive that. And like knowing that my people are that strong makes me very, very proud, like very proud. And it um I think that just like shapes me to who I am because um so many people weren't able to come to America, and my parents were lucky enough to, and that's why I work so hard, because they came here for a better future and to get away from all the mess that was over there at the time. And yeah, so that's like a really being Vietnamese, or like I'm very culturally Vietnamese, not so much Chinese, just because not that much, like a pretty small percent of it. So um yeah, I don't know, it just makes me, it's a very big part of my identity. That's like always like one of the first things I say when, or like always the first thing people ask, like, oh, what are you, like, oh, where are you from, what part of Vietnam are you from? So yeah, it's just like, it's just me, I look Vietnamese. I just am. It's a very big part of me.
So I think for me, I think I'm still learning how um like my culture and heritage play into my own identity, just because, for the longest time when I did go to like Chinese school, like wasn't very proud of it. Like when I went to, and then when I went to school, no one else was Chinese, or not really like there's like two other Asians, so I really didn't really understand how to interpret it or how to be proud of it. So I think I'm honestly still learning. So when I do go like to school and stuff like that, and I hang out with like a lot of my Asian friends, I think um I kind of I think like I realize like that I am more Asian than I think I am. And then when I go home, like, because my family is white and I mostly have like, like white friends, it's just a white environment, which is not a bad thing. It's just like what I grew up with. So sometimes I feel like when I go home, I kind of forget about it. Um, but I think for me, it's important that I keep like just exposing myself to like not even just my own culture, but like other cultures. And I kind of just understand that like I am like Chinese and I should be learning more about it and be proud of it.
Yeah, I think learning different cultures is an important thing for a lot of people. And I think that's people refusing to do so is where discrimination comes from. And I think when you learn other people's cultures, it gives it like, um, how do I describe it? It makes you more accepting of a lot of more people just because you understand where they're coming from and what their beliefs are and like how they live and things like that. When people don't care to understand how people live and like live their lives and their beliefs, that's just where people get confused. And then when they don't want to learn about other people's cultures, they get scared because it's unknown to them. And that's why they get so defensive. And that's why people that are racist are very scary
Mhm.
because they're just scared of the unknown. It's not that they hate specific people for like a real reason. It's just that they look different from themselves and they're scared of like, oh, like I don't know where they're from. Like what are like what do they do? Like why do they eat like that? Like why did they not do this, that, whatever, So yeah.
I just want to say that like to Frankie that I think it's important to understand that like how much we know doesn't kind of like affect like what our identity is. So like if you don't know too much about your culture or if you do know a lot, it doesn't matter just because like you have to understand like you are like you are like Chinese enough or Vietnamese enough to kind of like understand that you are who you are. So I know like there's like a lot of issues regarding like oh like you're not Chinese because you don't know how to speak Chinese or like you don't know Cantonese or things like that. Or like you don't know Tagalog or you don't know Vietnamese, so you can't call yourself that just because like you don't understand the language. So I think it's very important to know like like issues like that is like very I don't know, I feel like it hinders like like kind of like understanding your identity because
Mm,
you're kind of like asking yourself, oh like I'm not enough, so like I'm not gonna identify as that, you
yeah.
know.
I feel like because like when I was in Chinese school, like I wasn't very good at it. And then just like not really knowing much about it, I felt like less Chinese. But I think that it's not like you don't really have to know everything about your culture or not, or you don't have to like speak the language. But I think it's important just to like, I don't know, just kind of just accept like who you are. And then, you know, it's not, it's not about like being 100% Asian or being 100% like this kind of person. So,
Yeah, I think for our generation, it's kind of weird because a lot of us are um, first generation kids in America. So there's a bit of like an identity, not crisis, but like a little bit confusion about that because like when you're when you're like in your hometown with your friends, oh, like you're super Asian just because of the way you look. But then when you go to your home country, you stick out like a sore thumb because
mm,
you don't speak the language or you have like a really thick accent. Like
Mhm.
I sound like a valley girl when I speak Vietnamese, and that's why I kind of refuse to use it. I just like I listen, I can understand very well, but I just putting the words into sentences is very hard for me for some reason because there's a lot of exceptions, rules, whatever. And even though I can't speak Vietnamese very well, I still, it's still like a huge part of me just because of my parents, and I thank them every day for that. But Yeah, I don't really know where I was going with that. But there's no, oh yeah, there's like no requirement on like being Vietnamese enough, being
Mhm,
Chinese enough, whatever. It's the only requirement is that it's in your blood.
mhm,
Mm,
That's not even like the percent, because like I don't know, for me, I'm like 75 Viet, so that's why that's like the most important thing to
mhm,
me, and that's both sides are Viet too, so that's why that's like a really big thing. Like one side is like also French and the other side's also Chinese, so they didn't really um identify with that too much, just because a lot of people are mixed Chinese and Viet, and Chinese and Vietnamese and French, just because of like the history of the land. So yeah, I think that's something that our generation needs to learn, because I know a lot of people do get upset about it, especially when they get into college, when they're trying to like find themselves and learn their identity. Um, People forget that even if you don't speak a language, that doesn't make you any less of what you are.
mm, well said.
true. So my next question is, being involved in student organizations as Asian American student leaders in your sorority, what are some skills that you have obtained in your leadership role, and how can you utilize those skills in life?
Can I go first?
So I think before I haven't, like in high school, I didn't really take a lot of like leadership roles. So then when after I joined my sorority, Katie Phi, I took a lot of like leadership positions just because our sorority is so small and like everyone had to have a position. So I learned how to time manage, and I learned how to like start a fundraiser and make like almost like $1,000 to $2,000, something that I would never have done if I didn't join this organization. And I think, well, and also like speaking skills and just communication skills, like reaching out to different schools to do like a fundraiser or to plan like a big event for breast cancer, just like that. And I think in the future, like having these skills and um knowing like, because I planned like events before, or just knowing how to reach out to other organizations and stuff like that, I feel like that will definitely help me when like um because I'm going into nursing school. I just, even then, like just communicating with like patients or people that I don't know, just yeah, because for KD5, we had to talk to a lot of people that we've never met before when we'd go to these big conventions and meet like sisters all over from the country. So I think it will play a role into how I communicate with like my coworkers or patients that I don't know and who have different backgrounds and stories and all that.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, basically the same thing for me, just because we had the same experience. Where like we became sisters the same semester, all of that, and we both also like took on a lot of leadership positions too. Another, yeah, like a huge thing that we weren't learned was definitely time management, and then event planning, and then also just working with a bunch of different personalities, because even though we were smaller, we were probably like on an average of 25 every semester, and that's 25 different personalities. It's
And all
cramped in
girls.
one classroom trying to do a fundraiser or like do our semesterly event, and it's like a very hard process, just because everyone works differently and like people communicate differently too. So it's like, oh, this person isn't texting me back, they're lazy, like they won't get this from me. But what if they're just like not the type of person to really look at their phone? So I think the thing that I'm most grateful for with Katie Phi is learning how to work with so many different types of people, just because people think that everyone else works like them until they work with other people, if that makes any sense. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's definitely learning like a balance of what to expect from people and whatnot. Like,
Yeah.
like you can't rely on one person for everything, and you also have to work as a team.
Mhm.
And also not everyone works the same. So someone might be working hard in their own way and it might not be like recognized, but then someone who's like running around and doing all this, it might be recognized. So it's just kind of like understanding how other people work.
Okay. I just have a follow-up questions. Do you guys think that do you think sororities and frats are doing its part to ensure to keep Asian American culture active throughout their college careers and around campus?
I personally think at Rutgers specifically, I think Asian sororities and fraternities could definitely do a better job. I think for us specifically, people kind of just worry about we have like requirements that we have to do every semester, and they kind of just worry about that, which kind of sucks because that's not like what we obviously want to do more, and then like right now we really, or like they really can't do anything right now because of COVID. But that's why like whenever I got the chance, like I would show like my sisters my culture somehow, like with when we had to volunteer while we were in the process, like I brought my whole class to my mom's like yearly New Year's event, so they saw me like in action like drumming, dancing,
It's very cute.
all of that. And like we all wore aoyais too, like matching. It was super cute. And they really enjoyed it too. um yeah, it's like that's like one thing I do regret about my like sorority undergrad career. I wish I like was able to incorporate that more. um but I'm only one person, I could only do so much, and I was dealing with a lot already, especially with dance troops, so it's
Yeah.
okay.
I think that so Rutgers does have these requirements as Almanda talked about, and these requirements are to, make sure you go to other organizations' events and support them and make sure you're hosting like fundraisers and you're doing just going to certain events so that your sorority or your fraternity stays updated with, what's happening and you're not just like functioning within your own little bubble. But I think those requirements kind of like restrict um like organizations or like make it like a simple, like easy way out just to like hit requirements.
Hmm.
So I think that like, I mean, the organizations at Rutgers are there are a lot that you could join. Like there's the Filipino one, the Taiwanese one, Chinese, Korean, all this stuff. So there's many like organizations and um that like the sororities and fraternities could um mix with and have events with. I think that I don't know, I feel like sometimes they're like a little hesitant because they want to stay within their own bubble.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I think
I
also.
definitely learned a lot, like from other cultures, just from like being in sororities and like having to go to like a Filipino event or like the Taiwanese event. So I definitely got a lot of exposure. But there's obviously like there's always something that you could do to, you know,
Do more of.
more. Yeah.
I think I think it was just kind of hard for us to focus on things that we wanted to really focus on, but ended up not being able to, just because the requirements are kind of a lot. And we also have like a very high standard of what we want to do. Like whenever we do fundraisers, like everyone drops everything for a week, or like especially the day that we make everything. Like it's so much work, and I think it's just like a lot on our plates to be able to do all of these things, because we can only do so much, especially for full-time students, and people are working, some people have two jobs, so it's kind of hard, but we tried our best, I guess.
And just another questions. Do you think there's a stigma when it comes to Asian sororities?
Yes. I think well for me, like I didn't really know anything about Asian sororities, but now being in it, I always hear like, oh, they're just like party animals. They're like kind of bratty. They just want to like look pretty and go to like put on makeup and just like look cute and hang out with guys and go to bars and drink and just that kind of scene.
Mhm.
And obviously it's not true for everyone. You know, people are going to do what they want to do, but there's definitely I think a stigma around Asian sororities, and I think it's almost gotten worse as it's as time has gotten on, especially like in 2020. So
Especially with that like new ABG culture, or like it just
mm,
got really big, especially this year because of like subtle Asian traits, all of that.
it's like Asian baby girl, where it's like,
Yeah. So
yeah,
people always categorize, like if you're in Kitty Phi or like in any or like most Asian sororities, they'll just be like, "Oh, you're an ABG," like right away. And it's like that's not, because ABG comes from like gangsters. So that's obviously not what we are. We're just in a sorority. So I don't really know where that came from. um, but yeah. What else? What was the question again?
Oh, do you think there's a stigma when it comes
Oh
to
yeah.
shorts?
Yeah, there is 100%. Even before I started, like I would be like, "Oh, like I was thinking about Russian Kitty Phi. Like, what do you know about them?" Or like, "Do you know anything about them?" And then they'd be like, "Oh, like Asian fraternities and sororities like pledge like crazy." And I'm like, "Well, that's very illegal to do like physical things like that and stuff like that." And I don't know, people just like are really scared of it because of the horror stories that they hear. And I most of those stories are from like at least 10 years ago, because that's before like all these laws have like got passed and all these unfortunate like tragic events happened. But the good thing that is that there is change coming on its way, and it's a slow process, but then again, it's not going to happen overnight because we have existed for how many years, like 31 years out now. So it's a very hard thing to change, especially like across the board, because we have like 60, 50 something chapters. So like another thing is that like if you change something, like people, different regions judge you because it's like different cultures even within the sorority, because there's so many people in it. You know what I mean? So
So my last question is, do you think this stigma reflects with your experience as an Asian woman, um, living in America?
mm. So you're asking like the stigma that Asian sororities have, does that affect me?
Yeah, like does it share like similarities with like how an average Asian woman lives in America with all like the stereotypes and things like that?
Um, I mean, I feel like a lot of people know little about Asians in general. Me, like, nevertheless, like Asian sororities, I think a lot of people think that like Asians kind of study all the time. They have strict parents, which, most of them do, but it's just like if we're talking about the general, like, strict parents, don't go out, study all the time, good at math, that kind of thing. Like I don't think a lot of people know enough about Asian sororities enough to think that like that's what all Asians are like.
Mhm.
Because I didn't like, for me, I thought like Asians were like, what I just mentioned. And then joining like Asian sorority, I'm like, oh, it's a lot different than what I thought. Everyone's like very nice, they're smart, outgoing, but like they like to have fun, and life is all about a balance. So I think, yeah, I don't think like our what people think about Asian sororities like reflects all Asians as a whole.
yeah, I think for so I personally was originally gonna join like a mainstream sorority, and then I realized how completely like not diverse at all it was. And then um a lot of, I know a few people like Asian people that have joined like mainstream sororities and fraternities, and all they're seen as is Asian, and that's it. And that like makes me really upset because they're not seen as a person, like their own person. They're just seen as like, oh, that's like Ling Ling over there. And that's like so messed up to me.
Like the token Asian.
Mm.
Yeah, the token Asian. And like I feel like a lot of people in Katie Phi, they were like that token Asian in like their high school and their friend group, blah blah blah. And I was that person too, and I was just tired of it. And like um I was just tired of people thinking like the same thing for everyone. Like I suck at math. Like I'm a good driver. Like I'm not a lot of those stereotypes, especially the one that pisses me off the most is that like Asian girls are like very, what's it called? Not
Naive.
naive, like quiet, like shy, not assertive, things like that. And I'm the opposite of all of those things. So like even in high school, there'd be like when people like got to know me and they would be like, "Oh, you're not quiet like I thought you were going to be." And it's like, "No, you it's not because you knew my personality, it's just because I'm Asian. Like I'm not quiet at all. I'm loud as hell." Like I don't like that was like a thing that like it made me angry a lot. And um thank goodness for like the internet and like being able to see all other like media from different countries and stuff, because I feel like K-pop has been a very big thing lately, and Asian a lot of like younger Asians are um happy to see like someone that looks like them to be
Yeah,
so
like feel empowered by them.
Hmm.
successful and huge. Like because when I was in middle school, high school, I loved K-pop, but people didn't really know what that was.
Yes,
And
I got made fun of.
yeah, like people made fun of me. Even my own sister made fun of me, and she's Asian. Like it doesn't make any sense. But now like everyone listens to it,
Mhm.
and it's so like it it like makes me proud, because growing up I never really saw people that looked like me on like mainstream media. Like I would watch, and that's why I was such a YouTube kid, because Asians dominated YouTube at that time. And like being able to see content from someone that looks like me and someone that I can relate to was like a really big and like important part of just like accepting who you are. You know what I mean? So like seeing how successful like BTS is right now, even though I don't personally listen to them, makes me really happy, because kids that are younger, like high school, middle school, elementary school, blah blah blah, they're like learning their dances or like doing whatever, and they're like proud that they're not seen as like just a quiet nerdy Asian kid, or like a dragon, like one of those dragon ladies that can fight like a ninja, you know. Because that's the only media that we saw as a kid. Like what was it, like Kill Bill? Like what is this, like something like Ninja Assassin, whatever, like that's all we had. And that's so sad. Or like Breakfast at Tiffany's, like the guy that was like Japanese, he wasn't even Japanese. He was like painted darker and then like got prosthetics to make him look Asian, and no Asian looked like that.
True.
They just like that was just a character and they thought all of us looked like that.
Hmm.
So yeah.
I think now there's like more representation when it comes to Asian Americans.
Mhm.
Like Crazy Rich Asian. I think that was like one of the first movie where it was like
That's
an
when it
all-Asian
like
cast.
really kick-started.
And then like was it Off the Boat?
Fresh
Fresh
off
Off the
the
Boat.
boat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that TV series, like that was like a really good one, kind of like illustrating more about like Asian culture, and how like we were here, even like in the 70s and the 90s, even earlier than that too. It's kind of see how like American history has a little bit of Asian American too, and like we do have an impact with like the overall like history of America.
Mhm.
But yeah. One last question is, what advice would you give other Asian Americans struggling finding their identity?
I think, as I said before, like there's no requirement on being Vietnamese enough or Chinese enough, Japanese enough, whatever. It's just as long as it's in your blood, then that's who you are. And if you choose to embrace it, that's great. If you don't, that's your decision. There's no cookie cutter way to live. But I just personally think it's great to embrace your culture, just to know where you came from, your history, things like that. What It's like everything that just resulted in you. You know what I mean? I just find that very interesting. So I think that's really important to learn, especially like if you're a kid and you live in a predominantly white town or you feel left out. Um, Everyone feels that way, especially as Asian Americans. Um, but as you grow up, you'll learn to love your culture more and accept who you are, and learn that it makes you unique and it makes you you.
And it's never too late too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like for me as example, like I think if I were to ask more questions and stuff like that, I think just being curious, like you don't have to know where you came from, how you got here, anything, but I think having an open mind to learning and learning about other people, and even learning about people that you know that where you grow up from. I think it all helps in shaping the way that you think about yourself and your identity.
Mhm.
So I think just curiosity and open mindedness, and there's lots of media articles and different things to reach out to learn about
Or
different.
even just like, because Frankie, for we've been friends for 3 years now, and before um she learned about her background because of the like one of those DNA tests. And for the longest time, she just thought she was Chinese. And then just I think last year or 2 years ago, she was like, Amanda, my updates, like my results updated. Like I'm like 30-40% Vietnamese. And I told my mom right away, and she was like, I knew it, I knew it. Like, and then ever since then, like Frankie has always been very interested in learning my culture, but like knowing that she is partially Vietnamese, I've noticed that she comes over a lot more because she loves the food. and
I
also
always love food.
and also like my mom is very, she knows about her background, how she's
Mhm.
adopted, and learned that she was Vietnamese pretty recently. So whenever she comes over, she'll try to give her a little lesson, like on
Yeah.
accents, things like that. Like
Recipes.
yeah, recipes. That's honestly the best way. Just exposing yourself if you have a close friend
Mhm.
of the same culture and you feel a little lost. That's definitely the best way to do it because parents love feeding their friends' kids and just like teaching about culture, especially my parents because it's such a big part of our lives.
Mhm.
Even Len, when he comes over too, he'll like my mom would be like, "These are all the accents. It's AEIOU, like all these things."
That's so true.
But I love that my parents do that just because it's good for your friends to learn where you come from.
Mhm.
And then with Frankie, she's learning about herself. Oh.
I think like food like really bring us together, especially
Mhm.
like within our friend group. Like we're really diverse, even though most of us are Filipino. We have like Chinese and Vietnamese, but I feel like we always like have that sense of like Frankie said, curiosity when it comes to like our culture. Like
Mhm.
I know like you guys always come to like Raps events, and then Raps members like always come to like KD5 events. It was
Yeah.
like that connection kind of like makes us understand each other more.
Mhm.
And yeah, I really like that about like I think like Rutgers has like a really good relationship with each other when it comes to other Asian Americans.
Yeah.
So it's not just like, oh, like yeah, the Filipinos will hang out with the Filipinos, like the Koreans with the Koreans. It's all like just like really diverse, and everyone knows each other. Things like that.
Mhm.
So yeah. All right. So that concludes our meeting. Again, thank you guys so much for meeting with me.
Thank
Um,
you, Len.
but yeah,
Thanks,
I appreciate
Len.
it. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.